welcome to another video, or if this is your first video of mine, hey, how you doing? Today I am bringing you my December wrap-up, the last wrap-up of 2017, and quite possibly the best one I've ever done. Like, I got through 7 books this month, which is a lot for me, so I'm incredibly proud of myself. I think this is quite possibly the biggest wrap-up I've ever done. Don't hold me to it though, I don't know. But with any luck, I will be able to keep this momentum and go into January with this really great reading space that I seem to be in. And fingers crossed to get a good start on my reading goal for 2018. Who knows? Anyway, I will just crack on with showing you what I got through in December. The first book that I finished in December was Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I've mentioned it a fair few times. I'm not particularly a Harry Potter person. This is my first time reading the series. I'm not really enjoying it that much, but as I've discussed many times, I don't know if it's because I missed the age, people disagree, I don't know, I'm trying. When I went up to Edinburgh to see G, she kind of persuaded me that the audiobooks would be the way to go, and I read this on audio, or listened to this on audio, and it did improve the experience for me, undeniably. I enjoyed the audiobook more than I enjoyed physically reading the first 2, so maybe that's the way forward for me to tackle the rest of the series, but I'm just not into it, and I feel bad for saying it because I know so many people are like, Harry Potter, how can you not like Harry Potter? And I don't know, I think it's because I missed the age, I missed the era. Other people say that's impossible, you can't miss the age. It's, you know, any age can read Harry Potter and love it. I'm just struggling and I'm sorry. But I did read it and I enjoyed this more than I enjoyed the first 2 because I listened to it on audio, I think. But people have said that from here is where the series starts to get more grown up, because that's been my major issue, it's just too childish. But if people are right and this is where it gets more grown up, then maybe I'll enjoy the next books more, but I think audio is the way to go for me, so I will tackle the next one on audio at some point as well. The next book that I finished in December was The Polar Bear Explorers Club by Alex Bell. I adored this. I said I was going to wait until December to read this one because, like, look at that cover, it's so wintry, and it is about a polar bear explorers club. It's about a club of explorers that explore the magical Arctic lands where there are yetis and tiny dinosaurs and magical things and wolves and all sorts, and it was amazing. The cover is stunning and the inside story is just adorable as well. I loved every page of this, and I flew through it really quick because it is actually a children's book, and I believe this won the Children's Book of the Month for November for the Waterstones Children's Book of the Month, and I really loved it. And this kind of put me in the mood for polar fantasy. I'm still really in that mood, but I'm struggling to find decent polar fantasy. So if you've got any recommendations for polar fantasy, please let me know. But this I loved. I didn't mention the star rating I gave Harry Potter because I can't remember. This one I did give 4 stars. I adored it, but you know, reading it at my age, I can't give it 5 stars because it didn't have all the things that I would look for in a book, but I adored it. If you've got young children, I highly recommend reading this to them, or if they are old enough to read, like, then get them to read it. It's a great children's book, and I would recommend if you have children that are into fantasy or starting to get into fantasy, then I loved it. As I said, that then put me into like a polar fantasy vibe, and I picked up Even the Darkest Stars by Heather Fawcett, which is about a girl mountain climbing. The polar fantasy was real in this as well. This continued the sort of polar fantasy vibes I was on, and I've yet to find any more, so hit me up with the polar fantasy recommendations. But this I adored. This was one from a Fairy Loot box, and I remember opening it, seeing the cover and being a bit like, eh. But yet again, Fairy Loot have surprised me because although the cover is the inside of this book I thoroughly enjoyed. It's about a girl called Kamzan who wants to be like a world-class mountain climber, and the opportunity arises for that to happen, and she goes on this mountain climbing expedition with someone, and it was way more fantastical than I thought it would be. Like, I was expecting it to be quite, not mundane, I was expecting some sort of fantasy element because it came from Fairy Loot, but I wasn't expecting it to have as much as it did. Like, there were ghosts and weird half-man, half-bird creatures and witches and shapeshifters and just general magicians, and I wasn't expecting any of that, so it absolutely blew me away. But also, I loved the characters characters, I loved the story, and I loved the little romance that was in there. Like, it was so good. I did give this a 4-star rating just because there are certain parts in it, I can't up it to a 5 because there are certain parts that are very generic, typical tropes that you've seen so many times before. But for enjoyment, I would put it up there because I really enjoyed it. But in terms of like originality, like, as I say, those tropes were prominent in there, so I had to knock it down to 4, but I really, really enjoyed it. Like, take my word for it, I enjoyed it. I have filmed a book babble for this. I don't know when that will be going up, but it's in the process. Next up, I listened to another audiobook of a book that I don't actually have, and that is Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. I love Neil Gaiman. That's not really a surprise, is it? And in Audible's 12 Days of Christmas, it was available for 99p, so I got it. And I really enjoyed that as well. I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads, probably more towards a 3.5. I enjoyed it, I enjoyed the story, I enjoyed what it taught me. Like, I don't know much about Norse mythology at all myself, and I really enjoy Neil Gaiman's writing, so the two combined was really good. However, I'm not sure if like short story compilations are for me, because I felt quite like detached from it. Like, each time there was a new chapter, a new story in the gods' lives, then I felt a bit detached from it. I mean, it was good enough, I enjoyed it. As I say, I enjoyed what I learned from it, but it wasn't really something that would stick with me, and it wasn't something that I felt like connected to in any way. Like, it was more of an educational read on mythology than it was anything else. Does that make sense? Like, I enjoyed it for what it was, but I couldn't give it like 4 or 5 stars because I didn't feel any sort of connection to it. It was more educating me on mythology because I know nothing about it myself. But, you know, I love Neil Gaiman and I love his writing, so that was all evident in there, and it was narrated by Neil Gaiman himself, so like, points for that too. Next up was my Christmas Day read, and that was Rat Queens Volume 1, Sass and Sorcery. This was my Christmas Day read after Christmas dinner when everyone's like, with like bellies full of food, and I sat and read this in its entirety because it is just a graphic novel. I did mention it in my What I Got for Christmas because obviously I had already read it, and I really, really enjoyed it. It was sassy, it was action-packed, it was full of kick-ass females, and I loved it, and I can't wait to get my hands on Volume 2 and read that. It was so quick to fly through, but it was so action-packed, and although obviously with it being short, you don't really get much of an insight into the characters and their backgrounds, and I'm sure that will happen the more we go. But I already find myself like feeling connected to these girls just from this. Like, I'm rooting for them because I think they're awesome. So I really enjoyed this, and I can't wait to get the next one and read that, hopefully sometime soon. The next book I read as a buddy read with Jess. I'm so happy to be buddy reading with Jess again because we fly through books together and it's such a great experience, and that is The Last Namsara by Kristen Cicerelli. I absolutely loved this book, like, so much. I gave it 5 stars. It was amazing. The characters were amazing, the story was amazing, the dragons were amazing, the romance was great, the conflict was great, the politics was great. Like, there was so much to it, and I loved it, and I can't wait for the next one. Like, there was the interweaving of the mythology of this world and the gods, and then there were the dragons, and there was like an uprising, and there so much happened, and I loved every minute of this. I will say there was a particular sentence in here that did make me cringe, and that was the very typical in YA like romance scenarios is she let out a breath she didn't know she was holding, and when I saw that I did kind of go like, ugh, cringe. I still loved it. Like, I can't fault it for its like slight cringiness in the romance, because romance tends to, like, with very tropey romance, make me a bit like, ugh. But I give it to it, it didn't do that much, just that one time really did get me. But I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. I cannot wait for the next one, and yeah, I love it. I may or may not do a book babble on this. Let me know if you want me to do one, but I thoroughly enjoyed this and highly recommend that you check it out. If you haven't, it was great. I really loved it. I didn't even really tell you what it was about other than the elements in it. So this is about a girl called Asha, who is the Iskari of her peoples. Her namesake Drake is the like god of death and destruction, and she is a dragon slayer, and she's kind of been led to that point in her life from a series of events that happened in her past. Won't tell you any of that because major spoilers, but it follows her on her journey to like save herself, and it was fantastic. I loved it. I highly recommend you read it. And that takes me on to my last book of December and my last book of the year. I actually finished this at like 5 to 12 on the 31st of December, so I only just squeezed it in, but that is An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. I enjoyed this a lot. However, I will say it's really small and I think it needed to be longer to explain things a bit better. Certain parts of this felt incredibly rushed, and I was kind of reading back over things and thinking, but that doesn't make sense. How? Why? What? It just felt very rushed, like she was trying to tell the story in as quick a time as possible, and I feel like if they just made it a bit longer, it could have been so much better. That being said, I really enjoyed this, and I gave it 4 stars. I think I gave it 4 stars. I've seen people say in their reviews that it's very similar in vibes to the ACOTAR series, and it absolutely is. There's no denying that. It's very similar. You've got the fairylands split into the courts by season, and our main female character is a painter who gets whisked away to the fairylands and romance ensues. Like, very similar to the ACOTAR series. But I did really enjoy it, but it was quick. It felt rushed and I wanted more explanation. Again, I don't know if I'll do a book babble on this. Let me know if you want me to, but I gave it 4 stars. Romance is definitely way more prominent in this than I usually like, but I feel like I was kind of in the mood for it, so I enjoyed it. However, there was something else going on as well, like there was like conflict in the fairylands and stuff which was happening, but the main story was definitely the romance between the 2 main characters. So yeah, if you want me to do a book babble on this, let me know because I'm conflicted currently. But yeah, that is everything that I read in December of 2017. I think that was a cracking end to the year. So yeah, 7 books, can't complain. I had a good time. I hope you had a good time, and here's to hoping that we all smash our reading goals in the next year and get started with a fantastic January. I am gonna leave it at that today. I hope you have enjoyed. If you have, please give us a thumbs up, chat to me down in the comments about all sorts and everything. If you aren't subscribed and fancy subscribing, I'm always eternally grateful for that. I upload every Sunday and Wednesday and some more days in between if I'm feeling generous, and I will see you next time. Bye!